And if we don't win this fight, we are going to be in desperate trouble, which is where we are right now. Okay, thank you. So, Tracy, right? What is the difference between lobbying and bribing? Honestly, it is the degree of connection. Now, don't get me wrong, I think that the way that lobbying is working is dead wrong. And I've talked to lobbyists in a blue state who told me we can basically draw up a blueprint of how to pass a law. And it's a question of how much money to give to which people, how many people. I'm only talking to Democrats because there's no Republican in the world who wants to hear this anyway. And all we're talking about is when you're on the phone as a servicer of a student loan, you have to tell the truth. You have to tell the student borrower what is actually good for them. And we're going to have a state office where they can call to get information. So it's absolutely obvious stuff. Like, there should be no question. Before I showed up for every day for 2 weeks, there had been lobbyists from banks and servicing companies going into these Democratic legislators' offices and saying, you know, this is going to hurt our bottom line, basically. And when I would go in, they would say, are you serious about this? And I'd say, okay, student borrowers, young Americans who are trying to do what their parents ask them to do, and everyone in society, get educated, become more productive, be good citizens. Like, am I seriously that they should be treated decently? Yeah, aren't you? So, I mean, you couldn't have a clearer question, and they're all Democrats. So is that right? Look, the money's the problem. If you said to me, should the representative of a bank be allowed to go in and present their side of the case about loans to students? Sure, sure. And should you be able to? Yes. The question is, if I'm getting a bunch of money from you, even if it's not that day, even if there's no explicit, as we say in the Ukraine hearings, quid pro quo, you know that those people are sitting there saying, I raise a ton of money from banks, and if I don't get the money, they're going to give it to my opponent. So it's kind of a double whammy. So we've got to get the money. And so that you can't buy a system. I mean, I'm saying these corporations have bought the system without money. And so as long, it doesn't, bribery is when you go in and say, if you vote against this, I'll give you this bag of cash. Lobbying is giving them the bag of cash and having them understand that it's part of a system and they better go along. And we gotta change that. We just have to change that. Of course I believe in fines. But I know that corporations, I know this, do a calculation of what is the chance I get caught. If I get caught, what's the chance I get fined? If I get fined, what is the range of fines? Okay, that's what it costs to do this. This is what it costs to do the right thing, which is higher. That can't happen. It can happen. And, you know, I specifically, with regards to the financial crisis, $330 billion worth of fines. Nobody went to jail. That's an amazing fact. I mean, one of those numbers has to be wrong. If you defraud Americans for $330 billion, someone has to go to jail. And if no one goes to jail, you can't have stolen $330 billion. So I believe that to change that calculation, the Justice Department has to bring criminal sanctions. And it doesn't matter if you're defrauding Americans about mortgages or conspiring to addict Americans to opioids or defrauding Americans about drug pricing in ways that I think are criminal. We've got to change the calculation so people think if I do something wrong, I'm going to go to jail, and therefore when I'm asked to do something wrong, I'm going to say no. And Wells Fargo is a perfect example. No one ever, I mean, did you guys hear this? I mean, they created millions of fictitious accounts. And there was a story, I mean, of a young woman who created fictitious accounts for her grandmother. Because the corporation was basically saying you need to create this many new customers, and there was no way to do it. So they were basically saying, I don't want to hear about how you raised the money. I just want to hear that it's been raised, and if you don't do it, you're fired. So I agree. We need to to change this calculation and make people within corporations understand they're American citizens. They're going to be held to the American law. That drawing a corporate line around them does not protect them. And we're going to do that. Because that's going to be a huge part about taking back this country. Is if you can go to jail for 10 years for selling $150 worth of heroin on the street, how can you not go to jail for selling $150 million of heroin through a drugstore or through doctors? You cannot do this to American citizens. Look, I've been traveling this country full-time for 7 years. People use a lot of big words in American politics. They really do. They talk about stuff that most people don't know about. You know, block grants and, you know, reimbursements and lots of complicated things. This isn't complicated. They are doing a program of cutting taxes and being cruel to Americans as a result. And they're doing it across the board in every Republican state, and it's really what Trump does. Cut taxes, cut education, cut health care, beat up on working people, and allow pollution. That's their economic program. It's a disastrous economic program for the American people. It is incredibly selfish. It has gone to levels that are literally absurd. In Oklahoma, they cut taxes for 6 people, and in a quarter of the school districts, they're 4-day weeks. Literally. They have 4-day school weeks. And 6 people got the benefit. There is a level of cruelty here, and honestly, you guys, I hate to say it, but I've seen it in Iowa. Talking to nurses working in Iowa, how they're paid, how they're treated, overtime, honestly, broke my heart. It's cruelty. And, you know, I'm not it's not right. And it's been really not right, and it's not complicated, and we are going to have to win and push back hard. That's why I'm running for president, honestly. Because, I mean, I did build a business from scratch over 30 years, and I'm someone who believes in a competitive, innovative, dynamic private sector. I also know from experience that the idea that we have in our heads and that we're taught, and that is commonly thought in the United States to be true about markets, there is huge power in markets, but the idea that we have perfect markets in these United States is false. And so if you look at the medical market, it's not like there are a bunch of people supplying drugs, and so we can choose and we can drive down prices because it's like Econ 101. There are 100 companies, so they're all competing on price and quality, and so it's a perfect market with a lot of suppliers and a lot of users, and so it equilibrates. So because of concentration and rules, so many of our markets don't really function the way they're supposed to. And so I do believe in data. Of course, as for all the things that can be helpful for transparency, I believe in transparency so people can have information and use it. But in much of our society, there's either only one seller or one buyer, and often both, with the government being the buyer. And so I have always felt that we have moved away and I'll give you an example, which is climate. We've had the most progressive climate laws in the world in California for something like 12 to 14 years. So we've had everything. We have a price on climate, we have a cap and trade system, we have rules, We've been doing this in some of the stuff like building efficiency since 1970. So we can look at the rules and we can see what drives change so that we're not just hypothesizing. And I can tell you this, you know what really drives change? Rules. Like, I actually love, I'm a market person. I'm an information person, a market person, because I want people to have the freedom to make up their own minds. Just so you know, I'm for a public option in healthcare because I don't want to tell 160 million Americans, I know your health, your family, and your life better than you do, so you're doing it my way or you're going to break the law. I'm a choice person, and for choice you need information. And that's really what you're saying to you. That's how you get better decisions. And more people making more decisions is better. I totally agree. But you know what I believe in? Rules. Because what I've seen in climate is change the building code and make them live up to it. In drugs, my attitude would be, you know what? We aren't going to have enough people making these drugs, and if you guys, we're going to put in rules and we're going to negotiate against you, and we're going to drive these prices down, and we're not going to let you pretend this is a market, because it's not. You know, they do things in drugs that would make the mortgage defrauders proud. They literally do a thing in drug making where they, when it comes off patent, then it can be made by a generic drug maker. And the original patentee will pay the generics not to make it, hundreds of millions of dollars, not to make it, so they can continue to be the monopoly supplier and charge the high price. It's like, really? That sounds like fraud to me, and I would hire you to go after that, because that just can't be right. So in a lot of these things, we need the government to represent the American people and say, you're going to do it this way, period, or you're going to be breaking the law. And I had a thing, I went to Stanford Business School. So in 2010, there's the mortgage meltdown in 2008. In 2010, one of my friends from business school was the vice chairman of JP Morgan's investment bank. Sounds like a fancy job. And they give the biggest conference of the year in my hometown on healthcare. So he was running it. And they have hundreds of healthcare companies come and hundreds of healthcare investors come. So he called up 3 or 4 of his friends from Stanford Business School, including me, to come have breakfast, 2010. So we're just sort of, so we're just coming out. And he said, so here's a guy right at the heart of this mortgage fraud, right at the heart of JP Morgan Chase. So he goes, Tom, why do people hate us? I said, well, Dave, you bankrupted the country, they bailed you out, you were making millions of dollars before, you were bailed out by people who make $45,000 a year, you're making millions of dollars again, they're still making $45,000 a year, they hate you. He's like, do you think that's it? I'm like, no, that is it. And he goes, seriously, do you think that's it? Look, we're going to need rules. The first thing is we're going to have to change these tax cuts. I came out for a wealth tax over a year ago, long before I was running for president. It's not right what's been happening. We have to make this a progressive tax code again. Really. People say a wealth tax, that's reallocating money in society. I'm like, no, the money's been reallocated. This is the reallocation of the reallocation. Something wrong has happened. And honestly, it's not complicated. It's just a question of what are we going to do about it. And there is, I know people are talking about, and I hear them, we're going to meet in the middle. I know how to work with Republicans and all this stuff. I don't believe that, to be honest. I believe we have to win, because I think something really wrong has happened. I do. And climate's a perfect example. Are we going to believe half of science? Are we going to half solve the problem? That isn't going to work. If you look at people who are intentionally suppressing the vote, striking people off the rolls, specifically African Americans across this country, are we going to say, okay, we'll strike half the people off the rolls. We will meet in the middle. No, we're not going to do that. We need to make a change. We need to win. We need to do the right thing and step up. And that's honestly the fight in 2020. That's why I'm running. We're not really talking about Medicare for all versus a public option, because we're not getting either of them until we take back the government. We're not really talking about which Green New Deal are we going to pick, do we prefer? Because we're not getting a Green New Deal until we take back the government. We're not going to get the stuff that we deserve. I mean, I'm describing this as rights. Unfulfilled, unobserved rights of American citizens that are being trampled on all the time. And we're going to have to take back the government and get back our rights in the 21st century, which we can do, and which we are actually going to do. I think that is a very, very fair question. So let me break it down into two things: running and then advocating. In terms of running, just so you guys know, I'm 100% for public financing of elections. You know, something where you get a public match multiple times of people who give you money up to $200. And the number that people use sometimes is 6 times. So if you got a $200 contribution, you get $1,200 from the government, so that you can really finance a campaign, and it's much more grassrootsy, and I believe in grassrootsy. Really. In terms of advocacy, look, grassroots advocacy is an organization. I mean, people use fancy words, but really grassroots means hiring people, organizing them, setting up a task, managing it, changing things when they don't go right. And for instance, Next Gen registered 1.3 million people in 2016. Wow. It's a lot. We had something like 185 partners. So we would go to the African American Voter Registration, Education, and Participation Project in Los Angeles and say, you know what, let's do this. This is the number we want to reach. We know you guys exist. Let's agree how we're going to do this, blah, blah, blah. We did that with 185 groups around the United States, because you never, look, in grassroots, Next Gen, we do it ourselves. We knew this was a one-time thing. But what you never want to do in grassroots, if you have any integrity whatsoever, is show up 3 weeks before the election and say, I'm here to help you. It's like, everybody knows, you're not there to help. You're there to help yourself. So, answering your question, in terms of grassroots, I can see it. It is money. You know, I've just been coming from South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama. There are hundreds of thousands, millions of Democrats who are not registered in those places. It could flip those states for sure. And they're not registered and engaged because there isn't enough money to do it. And so in this case, to me, why did Next Gen do the largest youth voter mobilization in history last year? It sounds like a good thing. It's actually a bad thing. That's what the Democratic National Committee should do. Like, how could it be punk little us? Like, it's money. They didn't think it was worth their money. They didn't think that it was worth engaging and organizing young people, the biggest group in America, the most progressive group in America, the most diverse group in America. They thought it was too expensive to do, and we thought it was too expensive not to do. So in the non-election, look, on elections, I'm 100% for public funding. If we would do that, I would do that in a heartbeat. It's the right thing to do. On advocacy, one of the reasons we pay kids to do this, so Next Gen pays college students, I can't remember how many, we're virtually every campus in Iowa. We pay kids to work 20 hours a week for us, and we pay them fairly. And the reason we do that, because if you don't pay the kids, then poor kids can't do the job. They got to work in the dining hall, they got to work in the bookstore, they got to take another job where they'll get paid. They don't have 20 hours a week. They got to, that's why we pay them. Is we want to make sure it's fair. Organizing, hiring, getting people to work. For the most part, someone's got to, and do I think that gave me an advantage? I didn't really get anything out of it other than the feeling like, I think this is the most important thing I can do. How can we have a democracy if people don't participate? How can we have a democracy if less than 1 out of 5 young people votes? That's not a democracy. That's a failed democracy. And since I believe the answer to our problems is more democracy, more power to the people, that the solution lies in this room and rooms like this room, you guys are the answer. You know, people, who do I trust? I trust the people in this room and rooms like this. I do. If you say, do you trust the politicians or the people? I'm like, the people. And people are like, politicians will say, you know, they could do something crazy. It's like, well, it's not going so well right now. And, you know, trust the people. That's what I do. So let's talk for 1 second about the Electoral College, because I know it's obviously distorts. That it's not one person, one vote. It's the only states that count are the swing states. And we all know, you know, look, believe me, I know the swing states. Next Gen is in every swing state. And I can tell you how, and Iowa happens to be a perfect example of how the Democrats have lost. In 2016, we did not do grassroots in exurban and rural America. And we lost in Pennsylvania, which no one thought we could lose under any circumstance. We won Philly and Pittsburgh, and we lost everything else. And we didn't lose it close. We got destroyed. So we weren't in Lancaster. We weren't in the other parts of Pennsylvania. In Wisconsin, which no one thought we could lose. We won Milwaukee. We got killed in northern Wisconsin. No one went there. There was no grassroots effort in rural Wisconsin. Michigan, same. Florida, same. The story of the Democratic Party didn't want to organize young people, didn't want to organize in rural America, didn't want to go door to door. And I'll tell you a story. So there's a famous African-American preacher from North Carolina named William Barber. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of him. He's a Baptist preacher. He's incredible. And he does a lot of preaching in all-white Appalachia. And he was telling me he was in church, he gave his sermon. He came out in Kentucky, and he was in the parking lot, and he was talking to these guys after the service. And he said, you know Mitch McConnell is killing you guys? And they're like, yeah. He said, well, why do you vote for him? If you know he's killing you, why would you vote for him? And they said, well, he does show up. He does us the respect of showing up. So even though we know he's terrible for us, the Democrats don't even respect us enough to come by. And that, honest to God, is what's happened. Is we have not been willing to go door to door and lose 60-40 or 70-30 in rural America so we can win the state or win the country. And it's been, look, it's just like young people to me. It's like, show some respect. Talk to people. I believe that what I'm talking about, and by and large what Democrats are talking about, are so much better for Republican voters. I'm not disrespectful for Republican voters. I believe, do I think they want affordable health care? Yeah. Do I think they want their kids to get a quality public education? Yes, I do. Not get poisoned? Have a living wage? I don't think we've done our job. Truly. And I will never, I think what the Republicans said in voting for Trump was, drain the swamp. The system's been bought. They came up with a terrible answer, but they had a legitimate gripe. They said the system doesn't work for us, the system doesn't respect us, they really don't give a darn about us, so we're going to blow it up. They came up with a horrible, horrible, bad choice, but they had an absolutely fair issue. And I believe, look, they weren't wrong about that. We have to go to those places and make our case and show some respect. Because I believe our answer is right and super important.
let's assume you were voted in 2016. How would you approach China? And would you have levied the tariffs that are imposed now? Because agriculture and many steel companies are suffering now.
So, let me say this. The trade war is a complete failure. I would get rid of it on day one of my presidency. Day one. It was a mistake. They should never have done it. And I would treat, look, China to me is a frenemy. We are tied in with China. They're the second biggest economy in the world. We can't solve climate without China. We don't want China to fail. We want them to behave, observe the rules. We want them to do the right thing and treat us fairly. So that's one thing. Secondly, they don't just, look, I've spent a lot of time in China. I've probably been to China at least 20 times. Do I know that they steal intellectual property? Yes. Do I know that they close markets to our corporations? Yes. Have I known this for at least 15 years? More. And I've been there with Chinese people asking them, why do you do this? And they laugh and tell me, because we're cheating. You know, I said to them, one of my friends was a lawyer representing Chinese citizens and Chinese renters against the government and landlords. And she's an old friend of mine. She's a lawyer from America. And I said, why do they do antitrust in China? Do they really care about antitrust? You know, when there's a merger, they take the longest in the world to review antitrust. Her name's Phyllis Chang. I said, hey, Phyllis, do they care about this? And she goes, Tom, idiot. That gives them a right to go into the corporation for as long as they want and take all the information. So they drag it out as long as possible to steal the information. I'm like, really? She goes, yes, you idiot. And I was there in like 2002 talking to a friend, and he was telling me about this new company where you could charge online safely in China. And I said, that sounds a lot like PayPal. Is that like PayPal? And the guy's like, yes, it's exactly like PayPal. I said, well, why don't they just use PayPal? And he laughed. He goes, oh, PayPal's never going to get a license in China. It's not news. They cheat all the time, intentionally. The warfare we're going to have is, there's cyber warfare in the United States. You were asking about Russia in cyber warfare, China in cyber warfare. We are going, but it's not just us. They're not just cheating us, they're cheating a lot of people. The correct way to deal with these guys is on the issues in coalition with our partners. And use sanctions and push back. And that's the right way with the Russians too. As you said, they're not just hacking our elections, they're hacking the Brits and the EU, they're hacking elections all over the world. They're attacking democracy, including us. The Chinese are doing the same thing economically. But they're not just closing their markets to us, they're closing their markets to countries around the world. They're not just stealing our IP, they're stealing IP. So we should be pushing back really, really hard directly. But the trade war, wrong answer. That trade war just hurts Americans, as far as I can tell. Hasn't worked, won't work. Is very bad for the people of Iowa, specifically. It's a it's a rotten idea. And when the first rule about holes is when you're in one, stop digging. Yeah. So stop digging on the first day. No. But are we going to push back? Yes. Not to try and hurt China, to make them obey the rules so we can do well. We're going to enforce the rules in conjunction with the other countries. Look, Trump's gotten rid of our allies. He's told our allies, if you think we share anything, think again. It's just a competition. We have no relationship. We have no shared values. In fact, we don't even have values.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you like this political content, please consider subscribing. Thank you for watching.